Hey, hey, so um, I've been thinking that what's going on in the modern world with the internet and access to information, uh, in terms of politics, is that there's a lot of clashing that occurs, a lot of difference that occurs in politics and in perspective, in terms of sanities, in terms of paradigms, not paradigm shifting now, but paradigms clashing like broken ice sheets and tectonic plates thrashing or crashing against one another. I think this is due. Not just part and parcel. I think the lion's share of this is due to the accessibility of individuals at differing ages of development, interacting with these sincere dialogues of different other ages of development. And by that, I mean someone that's 14 through 18, moving through puberty, very doe-eyed, kind of just approaching the world more in a protected bubble, where they're sharing instances, like cute instances or cute means of interacting with the world, away from the teachers or the parents or the other more sophisticated, matured adults, is bubbled in their communities, or they might feel ostracized within their communities. But nonetheless, there's something youthful there. And if they click on a YouTube video, a Jordan Peterson video, or some other intellectual speaking in any manner, right? I was just listening to a guy talking about his insanity and his particular form of reality demise, right? Uh, so what I'm suggesting is this: is that the adolescents that are younger than 14, let's say, like 7 to 13, right? That's a different formation, relational aspect of the world, right? And that's why we've layered these different schools. We move kids often apart from each other at different ages. Even though there are some schools that do, like, K through 12 all in one building, right? The point is that the internet is allowing engagement in differing spheres of dialogue and content, which would have regularly, humans pre-internet would have grouped specifically at the exclusion and inclusion of different members based on age and based on development. They would have been moved out of earshot, or they would not be allowed within specific courses or coursework, if you will. And so things like, let's say, the left's, okay, so college age kids, right? Let's say they're 17 to 24. This traditionally has been a type of a space where one can identify generally with political domains, right? And by political domains, we mean that you're considering politics, not like today's politics, but just the idea of what it means for agreement of a policy issues, right? Agreement on what the best way forward is, right? And so everybody seems as if they want a type of monopoly on the truth, but these different stages of development have different paradigms, and those paradigms structurally are a truth, meaning for that group moving through it, they are structurally like a truth. They're butting up against a different level of development, a different level where when one reaches, let's say, they start moving out of their associates or their bachelors and they're moving into higher education, right? At this point, the higher education takes on in itself a new domain of data, right? Oftentimes, people will just move into a pragmatic workaday job at this point. Other people will move more into technical, philosophical analyses of different areas, right, to share with these groups. Like that's the critique is like, oh, modern feminism or modern postmodernism or Democrats have taken over the colleges, or the percentage of professors that are leftists are X, Y, and Z, and they're inculcating your kids with this non-practical advice, so to speak, right? But really, I mean, and I'm not trying to say but really as if to remove that, but to underscore it, right, is to say that what is happening is even as a person is moving into professorship, that becomes like a habituation. Some people want these young professors to immediately get tenure. Other ones would say to never get tenure, right? Such that their mode as a teacher never becomes substantiated. And this is happening because the pragmatic right is critiquing the intellectualism that's occurring in the minds that move into this domain, this age group domain of more specific consideration about the nuances of categories of thinking, right? And so what ends up happening is you get somebody that's, let's say, 17, 18, 19, and traditionally pre-internet, they might be taking on a whole different role in their thinking. Their thinking apparatus might be developing. They might put it this way: the organisms in the Western world, let's say, the organism should be taking on a role of preparing to engage the world at large, substantiate itself in society, and start positioning itself such that it can propagate and maintain its own existence and so forth. And it all of a sudden now is bumping heads with postgraduate philosophies, right? Or you could take a young 14, 15-year-old who's also bumping into postgraduate philosophies when they're barely emerging out of this protective shared cell, right? And so between the postgraduate and the pre-collegiate student is this new bubble of chanting leftists, and I say that, not to be pejorative but to be descriptive, right? And to say that their time to develop their politics is being interrupted by clashing paradigms, meaning the paradigm of one's natural emergence into politics, as we've known for a few centuries, so to speak. Whenever we might say literacy started to more predominate the population per capita, when universities were being not just more open to the general population, as opposed to maybe a more high-minded priestly class, a meritocracy of the youth. Like, oh, we're going to take these very high-minded graduates from high school, and we're going to move them into university, as opposed to everyone deserves a higher education sort of thing, right? So there's criticism there. I think all I'm suggesting here is that also psychologically speaking, a lot of individuals will allow, if they're not on a constant feed and they're left to ruminate, they can begin noticing, or other people can begin noticing, certain fractures in one's psychology, right? And that these, like the idea that schizophrenia is generally diagnosed in one's 20s, right? These are fracturing. This is kind of the older paradigm, a pre-internet paradigm that's moved into the modern day. But the reason I bring that up is because during that time, the recognition of the possibilities of not just that language can fracture, but the mind as it's connected to elements of its paradigm, meaning propositions and words and content and meaning of those propositions, becomes in contention and fracturable, right? And so because it becomes fracturable, um, this fracturability then can yield different psychological, how to put it, and what am I trying to say by this? I think what I'm trying to suggest is that the the bandwidth of information has expanded so heavily across anyone who has access to the net, which is essentially anyone given a smartphone, that there's a disjunct between their groups, their age groups, as age groups can identify with one another, running into conflict with different age groups. Right. Now, normally, lately, this is framed as claims to truth, who has a monopoly on truth. And so who becomes the high grand poobah of their own bullshit, to which others attempt to align their worldview. Right. I mean, maybe way back pre-literate days, it was, a king or a queen or an authority or a pharaoh or a priest, or like, the Catholic Church or something like that, a church's authority, right? And now that one has, so to speak, equal access, even though there's criticism about companies removing certain much data from other countries, parsing off what information is allowed in certain countries and then removing certain information from their platforms altogether, such as, like, let's say, the inside scoop from Syrians about what the West is really doing in Syria, or what kind of conflicts are there. Those don't often emerge in the Western news, so to speak. And other countries, like Google being rejected to not have carte blanche distribution of information in China, and that type of thing. I mean, this is happening globally. And so there is this sense of trying to contain global information. But my critique here is more about the about something that's about generational exclusions. Right? Let's exclude these pockets from these other pockets. But now people are being pressed, even cultures, subcultures, different groupings of people, provinces and regions of people used to take on different dialects and aspects of engagement, like the idea of Southern hospitality, let's say, or Boston's connection with baseball and its war with New York, or LA versus, the East Coast versus the West Coast, and something like that in the Americas, or the US and England, specifically those two as rivals, as opposed to, let's say, England and France and its history, and or any other exclusive regional location. I'm speaking even within those to speak about age groups and age group development, right? So despite all of these differing domains, via age, via province and region, via intellectual capabilities or opportunities, these types of things. All of the data is being shuffled together. It's being just thrown together. Okay, and so because of that throw together, I imagine there's more emergence into the world, as if the world is unfamiliar noise. And I think people, well, and this is just a sideline commentary, need to really keep their shit together and try to narrow in and constrain their mental data set. Like, they need to pull it back, classify it, rigorously themselves exclude themselves to other noise that might just be hitting them as an onslaught. And perhaps even this video might function as like a negative, like a burr in someone's foot or in someone's sock, or something like that. Perhaps my whole channel is like that. But yet other people can find these things interesting. So as listening to these two, I want to say, youthful psychotics, or people that are woke through their insanity and have already gone through these different insane realms of trying to engage the world of what is seemingly irrational, and carve out sense within that, in order to claim a sense of tentative identity within themselves, right, and tentative possibility within the world of symbols and its relationship to the world. So I was just listening to that, and that inspired me to want to make this quick video. Okay, well, that being said, I'm not certain what the cure is. In one way, we might trust an AI to analyze dispositions of different classes of human engagement, right? Even, grandparents take on a different role, or that age group take on a different role of being away from a lot of activity of the youth that, people in their 30s and 40s might take on, and people in their 50s and 60s take on a different role than those in their 70s and 80s. So there does seem as if there's this ongoing groupings of like agings, and that those need to be respective, and that when one speaks about political domains, they might want to note and denote that some of these movements are necessary for the in-group of a particular age. They're required of that age to move through these considerations and these behaviors, and that they're being classified as, oh, those are leftists, not Democrats, right? But in fact, they're like, maybe inculcated, youthful, early 20s, collegiate student leftists, or something to that effect. So anyway, I just want people to be conscientious and conscious of different classes of age and development, such that they're being named and titled in such a way that I think is trite, and it's not nuanced, and it's not considerate of what that organism or what that organism's group, and I don't mean group like gender group or identify as group, I mean their age group, their developmental strata group might be. Okay, that being said, I think the indexing of these things needs to come in from more of a geometric, noticing a geometric aspect, and approaching these as strata, as if one is analyzing the contents of maybe strata in a mountain, like a geologist might. Okay, thanks for your time.